I stood in the middle of our anniversary party, holding my phone high above my head, playing a recording that made my mother-in-law's face drain of all color. Her voice echoed through the speakers, crystal clear, detailing every payment she made to destroy my marriage. 3 months earlier everything seemed perfect. My husband Marcus and I had just celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Cleveland, Ohio. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Marcus worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown, and I managed a small bookstore on the west side of the city. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Least I thought we were. Marcus's mother, Patricia, had never liked me. From the moment we met at a family barbecue 6 years ago, I could feel her cold assessment. I wasn't from the right family, didn't have the right education, didn't dress the way she thought a woman should dress. Patricia came from old money, the kind of family that had streets named after them in the nicer parts of town. When Marcus chose to marry me anyway, she made her disapproval known at every opportunity. Backhanded compliments at holiday dinners. Pointed questions about when I'd get a real career. Expensive gifts for Marcus with nothing for me. I dealt with it because I loved my husband, and I thought time would soften her edges. I was wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning in late April. I was opening the bookstore, sorting through the previous day's receipts, when a woman walked in. She was beautiful, maybe 28 or 29. With long auburn hair and green eyes that seemed to sparkle even in the dim lighting of my store. She wore a cream-colored blouse and dark jeans, casual but put together. "Hi," she said, her voice warm and friendly. "I'm new to the neighborhood. Someone told me this was the best bookstore in Cleveland." I smiled, always happy to hear compliments about my store. "Well, I don't know about best, but we try our hardest. What kind of books do you like?" Her name was Sophie, or at least that's what she told me. Over the next 2 weeks, she became a regular customer. She'd come in every few days, always buying something, always chatting with me about books and life. She mentioned she was going through a divorce, that she'd just moved to Cleveland for a fresh start. I felt sorry for her. I recommended books about healing and self-discovery. We grabbed coffee twice at the shop next door. Then she started asking about my life. At first it seemed natural, the kind of thing friends do. But looking back I can see how calculated it was. She asked about Marcus, about our marriage, about our problems. I told her things I shouldn't have. That Marcus and I had been arguing more lately about money. That his mother was driving a wedge between us. That sometimes I felt lonely because Marcus worked such long hours. I didn't notice when Sophie started showing up at the same places we did. The grocery store where Marcus and I shopped on Saturday mornings. The gym where he worked out after work. The coffee shop near his office building. I didn't notice because I had no reason to suspect anything. Marcus mentioned her first. "I keep running into this woman," he said one evening while we were making dinner. "Red hair, really pretty. Says she's new in town. She was at the gym today, asked me to spot her on the bench press." Something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed it away. Cleveland wasn't that big. People ran into each other. It was normal. But then it kept happening. Sophie at the gym. Sophie at the coffee shop. Sophie at the grocery store, laughing at something Marcus said about avocados. He mentioned her more and more. Always casually, always innocently. Ran into that Sophie woman again today. Sophie recommended a new protein shake. Sophie asked if we knew any good restaurants in the area. I suggested we invite her to dinner. If she was new in town and kept running into us, maybe we could be friends. Marcus thought it was a great idea. We set it up for the following Friday. That dinner was the beginning of the end, or so it seemed at the time. Sophie showed up in a red dress that hugged her figure perfectly. She brought wine, expensive wine, and flowers for me. She complimented our apartment, our life, our marriage. She was charming and funny and just vulnerable enough to seem genuine. She told stories about her terrible ex-husband, about how he'd cheated on her with his secretary. Marcus was sympathetic. I was sympathetic. We both wanted to help this poor woman who'd been so wronged. After that dinner, Sophie became part of our lives. She texted me regularly, asking about books and life. She texted Marcus too. He showed me the messages, asking for advice about Cleveland or making jokes about their gym sessions. Everything seemed innocent. Everything seemed normal. Until it wasn't. It was Marcus who started acting different first. He became distant, distracted. He'd stare at his phone with a strange expression on his face. He started working later, coming home after I'd already gone to bed. When I asked him about it, he said the firm was busy, that tax season was brutal this year. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Then came the gifts. Marcus bought me flowers out of nowhere, took me to dinner at expensive restaurants we couldn't afford. He was attentive in a way he hadn't been in months, almost desperately so. It felt like he was trying to prove something, but I couldn't figure out what. I found the first message on a Wednesday evening in early June. Marcus had left his phone on the bathroom counter while he showered. It lit up with a text, and I glanced at it without thinking. It was from Sophie. I can't stop thinking about today. You make me feel things I haven't felt in years. My heart stopped. I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking, and scrolled up through their conversation. What I saw made me physically sick. Messages about secret meetings. Messages about how Marcus made her feel alive. Messages that were intimate and detailed and devastating. But something felt wrong. The messages from Marcus's side seemed off. They were passionate, yes, but they didn't sound like him. The phrases were wrong, the punctuation was wrong. Marcus always used proper grammar in his texts, a quirk I'd teased him about for years. These messages were casual, almost careless. When Marcus got out of the shower, I confronted him. I showed him the messages. His face went white, then red, then white again. I didn't send those, he said. I swear to God, Emma, I didn't send those messages. They're from your phone, Marcus. Your number. I don't know how, but I didn't write them. You know me. You know I would never do this. We fought for hours. He swore up and down that he hadn't sent those messages, that someone must have hacked his phone or cloned it or something. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But the evidence was right there on his phone in his message history. I told him to leave. He did, crying, begging me to believe him. He went to stay with a friend from work. I sat alone in our apartment, staring at the walls, feeling like my entire world had collapsed. Sophie called me the next day. Her voice was thick with fake tears. Emma, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Marcus and we tried to fight it, but the connection was too strong. Feel terrible. You've been such a good friend to me. I hung up on her. Then I blocked her number. Then I sat on my couch and cried until I couldn't breathe. My friends rallied around me. They told me to divorce him, that he was a cheating bastard, that I deserved better. My mother flew in from Arizona and held me while I sobbed. Even my boss at the bookstore, a kind older woman named Janet, told me she'd support whatever decision I made. But something kept nagging at me. Marcus's insistence that he hadn't sent those messages. The way Sophie had shown up in our lives so conveniently. The timing of everything. It all felt orchestrated, theatrical, like a play where everyone knew their lines except me. I decided to do something crazy. I hired a private investigator. His name was David Chen, a former police detective who'd gone private 5 years earlier. He had an office above a Chinese restaurant in downtown Cleveland, and his rates were surprisingly reasonable. I told him everything. The messages, Sophie's sudden appearance in our lives, Marcus's denial, the whole sordid story. I've seen cases like this before, David said, leaning back in his chair. Not exactly like this, but similar. Someone wants to destroy a marriage, they get creative. Let me dig around, see what I can find. Took him 2 weeks. 2 weeks of living in limbo, of Marcus calling me every day begging me to listen, of my mother-in-law Patricia suddenly being suspiciously supportive, telling me I was making the right choice in leaving Marcus, that she'd always known he wasn't good enough for me. That last part should have been my first clue, but I was too hurt and angry to notice. David called me on a Saturday afternoon. Emma, you need to come to my office. What I found, you're going to want to see this in person. I drove downtown with my heart pounding. David was waiting for me with a laptop open and a folder thick with papers. "Sit down," he said, his voice serious. What he showed me changed everything. Sophie wasn't Sophie. Her real name was Miranda Hartley, and she was an actress. Not a successful one, but an actress nonetheless. She'd done commercials, some small theater productions, a couple of bit parts in independent films. She had a website advertising her services for various events, parties, corporate functions. "Now, this is where it gets interesting," David said, pulling up bank records. 3 months ago, Miranda received a payment of $15,000 from a Patricia Morrison, your mother-in-law. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. What? It gets better. Or worse, depending on how you look at it. He pulled up more records. Phone records showing dozens of calls between Patricia and Miranda over the past 4 months. Email exchanges discussing the plan in detail. Photos of them meeting at a cafe in Shaker Heights, Patricia's neighborhood. David had even managed to get his hands on some of the emails. I read them with growing horror and rage. Patricia had hired Miranda to seduce Marcus, or at least to make it look like she was seducing him. Miranda was supposed to befriend me first, gain my trust, then gradually move into Marcus's orbit. The goal was to create enough suspicion and drama to destroy our marriage. But here was the truly diabolical part. Patricia had also hired someone, a tech guy Miranda knew, to clone Marcus's phone. Every message that appeared to come from Marcus to Miranda had actually been sent by this tech guy, using a cloned SIM card. Marcus had been telling the truth. He hadn't sent those messages. They'd been fabricated, inserted into his message history remotely. "Why?" I asked David, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why would she do this?" "Money usually," David said. "Your husband is her only child, right? Only heir." He nodded. "Patricia's family has money. Old money. I did some research. She's worth approximately $12 million, not including property and investments. If your husband divorces you, that money stays in the family bloodline. If you stay married, there's a risk you might get some of it someday, especially if you have kids." "We've been trying for a baby," I said. "We started trying 6 months ago." David nodded grimly. "That probably triggered this whole thing. Patricia didn't want you having children with her son. Didn't want you getting your hands on the family fortune. So she decided to break you up before that could happen." I sat there in David's office, surrounded by evidence of my mother-in-law's betrayal, and I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and sadness transformed into cold, calculated anger. Patricia had tried to destroy my marriage, destroy my life, ruin my husband's mental health, all for money. All because she thought I wasn't good enough for her precious son. "I want copies of everything," I told David. "Every email, every bank record, every photo. Everything." He raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to make sure Patricia Morrison regrets the day she decided to mess with my family." Over the next 2 weeks, I put my plan together. First, I called Marcus. We met at a neutral location, a park near the lake. I showed him everything David had found. I watched him go through the same emotions I'd felt. Disbelief, horror, rage. "My own mother," he kept saying. "My own mother did this." We talked for hours. About our marriage, about his mother, about what we wanted for our future. We both cried. We both apologized for not trusting each other more. And we both agreed that Patricia needed to face consequences for what she'd done. "I want to confront her," Marcus said. "I want to look her in the eye and ask her how she could do this." "We will," I promised. "But not the way she expects." Marcus's birthday was coming up in 3 weeks. Patricia always threw him an elaborate party, inviting family, friends, business associates. It was her chance to show off her son, to remind everyone of the Morrison family's status and importance. This year's party was supposed to be especially grand, a celebration of Marcus's 30th birthday. Patricia had already invited me, before the supposed affair came to light. After the blow-up, she'd called to uninvite me, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I think it's best if you don't come, Emma. It would be too awkward for everyone, especially Marcus. I'm sure you understand." I told her I understood completely. What Patricia didn't know was that Marcus and I were back together. We'd been careful, meeting in secret, making sure no one saw us. As far as everyone knew, we were still separated, still heading toward divorce. Marcus even moved into a new apartment to make it look convincing. We let Patricia believe her plan had worked. Meanwhile, I worked with David to gather more evidence. He found the tech guy who'd cloned Marcus's phone. For the right price, the guy was willing to talk, to provide a written statement about what he'd done and who'd paid him. We recorded his confession on video. We also tracked down Miranda. David approached her, told her we had evidence of fraud and conspiracy. Miranda cracked immediately. She was tired of the whole thing anyway, she said. Patricia was demanding and difficult, constantly changing the plan, never satisfied with how things were going. Miranda agreed to provide her own written statement and video confession. She even gave us the original contract Patricia had drafted, outlining exactly what Miranda was supposed to do and how much she'd be paid. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was working behind your back to destroy your happiness, and had to decide whether to confront them quietly or expose them publicly? I spent hours thinking about the best way to handle the reveal. Part of me wanted to confront Patricia privately, to spare Marcus the public humiliation. But the bigger part of me, the part that was still furious about what she tried to do, wanted everyone to know. I wanted Patricia's friends, her family, her social circle, everyone who thought she was such a pillar of the community, to see what kind of person she really was. Marcus agreed. "She cares more about her reputation than anything else," he said. "If we're going to hurt her, that's how we do it." So we planned our revenge for the birthday party. The party was held at Patricia's house, a massive estate in Shaker Heights with a ballroom that could hold 200 people. She'd hired caterers, a band, professional decorators. Everything was elegant and expensive, exactly the kind of event Patricia loved to host. I wasn't supposed to be there, of course. But Marcus had arranged for me to sneak in through a side entrance. I wore a long black dress and kept to the shadows, waiting for the right moment. The party was in full swing when Patricia called for everyone's attention. She stood at the front of the ballroom, a microphone in her hand, looking radiant in a silver gown that probably cost more than my car. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my son's 30th birthday," she began, her voice warm and gracious. "Marcus has always been the light of my life, my greatest achievement. As his mother, I've always wanted what's best for him, always tried to protect him and guide him toward the right path." She went on like this for several minutes, talking about what a wonderful son Marcus was, how proud she was of him, how she'd always put his happiness first. The crowd ate it up, clapping and smiling. Marcus stood next to her, playing his part perfectly, smiling like a dutiful son. Then Patricia said something that made my blood boil. "I know this past year has been difficult for Marcus. His marriage fell apart due to some unfortunate circumstances, but I want him to know that I'm here for him. I'll always be here for him. Family is everything, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect my family." That was my cue. I stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the front of the room. People noticed me immediately. Whispers spread through the crowd. Patricia saw me and her face went white, then red with anger. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "You weren't invited." "I know," I said calmly. "But I have something I need to share with everyone. Something about how far you'll go to protect your family." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system. Marcus had arranged this part, making sure everything was set up beforehand. Patricia tried to stop me reaching for my phone, but Marcus stepped between us. "Let her talk, mother," he said coldly. "Press play." The first thing everyone heard was Patricia's voice, crystal clear, from one of the emails David had found. "I need this done cleanly. I want Emma to think Marcus is cheating. I want her to divorce him. I don't care what it costs." The crowd went silent. You could hear a pin drop in that ballroom. Played more. Emails between Patricia and Miranda, discussing the plan in detail. Bank records showing the $15,000 payment. A video of Miranda confessing everything, explaining how she'd been hired to seduce Marcus, how she'd been told to befriend me first to make it more believable. Then came the tech guy's confession. He explained how he'd cloned Marcus's phone, how he'd created fake messages, how he'd been paid $5,000 by Patricia to do it. Patricia tried to grab the phone several times. She tried to talk over the recordings, making excuses, claiming it was all fake, that I'd fabricated everything. But no one was listening to her. They were all staring at the evidence, at the bank records showing her payments, at Miranda's face on the video screen explaining exactly what she'd been hired to do. Marcus finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the whole room. "You're my mother," he said. "I loved you. I trusted you. And you tried to destroy my marriage because you thought my wife wasn't good enough for the family name. You hired an actress to seduce me. You faked text messages to make Emma think I was cheating. You manipulated both of us, made us doubt each other, almost destroyed us. For what? Money. Status." Patricia's face crumbled. She tried to reach for Marcus, but he stepped back. "Don't touch me," he said. "I don't even know who you are." The room erupted. Patricia's friends were whispering to each other, shocked and horrified. Family members were demanding explanations. Marcus's father, who'd been standing quietly to the side, looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He'd known nothing about Patricia's plan, and finding out this way, in front of everyone they knew, was devastating. Patricia tried to salvage the situation. She insisted it was all a misunderstanding, that she'd been trying to protect Marcus from a bad marriage, that her intentions were good even if her methods were questionable. But no one was buying it. The evidence was too clear, too damning. Several people left immediately, refusing to stay at the party of someone who could do something so manipulative and cruel. Others stayed but avoided Patricia, clustering in groups and whispering. The party, which was supposed to be her triumphant celebration of her son, turned into her public humiliation. Marcus and I left together, walking out the front door hand in hand while Patricia called after us, begging Marcus to come back to let her explain. He didn't look back. The fallout was immediate and severe. Within 2 days, the story had spread through Patricia's entire social circle. Cleveland's not a huge city, and the Morrison family was well known. People talked. They talked at their country clubs, at their charity events, at their business meetings. Patricia Morrison, the woman who'd always held herself up as the epitome of class and grace, had been exposed as a manipulative, cruel person willing to destroy her own son's happiness. Several of her charity boards asked her to step down. Friends stopped calling. The family that had once revered her name started avoiding her. Patricia's entire social life, which she'd spent decades building and maintaining, collapsed in a matter of weeks. Marcus cut off all contact with her. He changed his phone number, blocked her emails, refused to see her. His father divorced her 6 months later, citing irreconcilable differences. Turned out this wasn't the first time Patricia had manipulated people to get what she wanted, just the first time she'd been caught so publicly. As for Miranda, she moved back to Los Angeles. Before she left, she apologized to both Marcus and me. She said she'd been desperate for money, that Patricia had made it sound like a simple acting job, that she hadn't realized how much damage she'd be causing. I didn't forgive her, but I understood. Patricia had a way of making people do things they wouldn't normally do. Marcus and I went to couples therapy. Even though we knew the affair had been fake, the whole experience had damaged our trust in each other and exposed some real problems in our marriage. We'd been drifting apart before any of this happened, not communicating well, letting small resentments build. Patricia had simply exploited existing cracks. Therapy helped. We learned to talk to each other better, to be honest about our feelings and needs. We learned that Marcus had been working so much because he felt pressure to live up to his family's expectations, and I'd been pulling away because I felt like I'd never be good enough for his world. Once we understood these dynamics, we could address them. A year after the birthday party disaster, things were better than they'd ever been. Marcus quit his job at the accounting firm and started his own business, something he'd always wanted to do but had been too afraid to try. I expanded the bookstore, adding a cafe section and hosting regular author events. We moved to a bigger apartment in a neighborhood we both loved. We also started trying for a baby again. This time, without the stress of Patricia's interference, it happened quickly. I got pregnant 3 months after we started trying. Marcus cried when I showed him the positive test. We both did. Patricia tried to reconcile when she heard about the pregnancy. She sent letters, emails, showed up at our apartment building. She insisted she'd made a mistake, that she'd been trying to protect Marcus, that she wanted to be part of her grandchild's life. Marcus refused every attempt. He told her that what she'd done wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated plan to destroy his marriage, and there was no coming back from that. His father, on the other hand, became a regular part of our lives. Richard Morrison had been horrified by Patricia's actions. He apologized profusely to both of us, saying he should have seen the signs, should have stopped her. We forgave him because he genuinely seemed remorseful and because he'd left Patricia, showing that he had lines he wouldn't cross. The baby was born in early spring. A girl. We named her Claire, after my grandmother. She was perfect, with Marcus's dark hair and my blue eyes. Holding her in the hospital, with Marcus beside me, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude that Patricia's plan had failed. If she'd succeeded, if Marcus and I had actually divorced, we wouldn't have this moment. We wouldn't have this family. Richard visited us in the hospital, bringing flowers and gifts. He held Claire with tears in his eyes, telling us he was sorry for everything, promising to be the best grandfather he could be. We believed him. Patricia sent gifts too, expensive ones, but we returned them all. Marcus was firm on this point. He didn't want anything from her, didn't want her to have any claim on our daughter. As far as he was concerned, Patricia had lost the right to be a grandmother when she tried to destroy our family. I'd like to say that was the end of it, that we moved on and never thought about Patricia again. But that wouldn't be true. Sometimes I still get angry when I think about what she did. The manipulation, the betrayal, the weeks of pain and confusion she put us through. Sometimes I wonder if we should have handled it differently, if publicly humiliating her was too harsh. But then I remember reading those emails, seeing the bank records, understanding just how calculated and cruel her plan had been. She hadn't acted impulsively or out of concern for her son. She'd spent months planning, paying people, orchestrating every detail. She'd been willing to destroy Marcus's mental health, to make him think he was going crazy, to ruin both our lives, all because she didn't think I was good enough for the family name. Marcus doesn't talk about her much. When he does, it's with a mix of sadness and anger. He mourns the mother he thought he had, the woman who'd raised him and claimed to love him. But he can't forgive the woman who'd tried to destroy his marriage. Sometimes he wonders if she'd done similar things before, if his whole childhood had been shaped by her manipulations in ways he never realized. We're careful now, more cautious about who we let into our lives. We trust less easily. But we trust each other completely, and that's what matters. The bookstore is doing well. Marcus's business is growing steadily. Claire is 6 months old now, healthy and happy, completely unaware of the drama that preceded her birth. We take her to the park, read her books, sing her songs. We're building the life we always wanted, free from Patricia's interference. Sometimes I drive past Patricia's house in Shaker Heights. It looks the same from the outside, grand and imposing, but I know it's empty inside. Richard told us she lives there alone now, barely leaving, seeing almost no one. Part of me feels sorry for her. She destroyed her own life trying to control Marcus's. She lost her husband, her son, her grandchild, her social standing, everything that mattered to her. All because she couldn't accept that Marcus had chosen his own path. But mostly I feel relieved. Relieved that we uncovered her plot. Relieved that David Chen was thorough enough to find all the evidence. Relieved that we had the courage to expose her publicly. If we'd confronted her privately, she would have denied everything, found a way to manipulate the situation, maybe even tried again with a different approach. The public exposure ended it permanently. She couldn't come back from that level of humiliation. The story became a cautionary tale in our social circle. People talk about it at parties, use it as an example of how far family manipulation can go. Some people think we were too harsh, that we should have handled it privately out of respect for Marcus's father and the family name. Others think Patricia got exactly what she deserved. I've thought about writing it all down, turning it into something more than just a story people whisper about. Maybe there are others out there dealing with manipulative in-laws, people who need to know they're not alone, that it's possible to fight back and win. Maybe our story could help someone else recognize the warning signs before things get as bad as they did for us. Marcus says I should do whatever feels right. He's moved past it more than I have, or maybe he's just better at compartmentalizing. He focuses on Claire, on our future, on building something positive. I admire that about him. His ability to let go of the anger and just move forward. But I'm not quite there yet. I still feel the rage sometimes, bubbling up when I least expect it. When I'm feeding Claire and I think about how Patricia tried to prevent her from existing. When I'm at the bookstore and I remember Sophie or Miranda or whatever her name was, pretending to be my friend while plotting against me. When I see happy families at the park and remember how close we came to losing ours. The therapy helps. Our therapist says it's normal to process trauma at different speeds, that I shouldn't feel guilty for still being angry. She says the important thing is that Marcus and I communicate about it, that we support each other through the healing process. And we do. Marcus is patient with me when I have bad days. I'm patient with him when he struggles with the loss of his mother, even though he knows cutting her off was the right choice. We've talked about what we'll tell Claire when she's older. How do you explain to your child that her grandmother tried to destroy her parents' marriage? How do you help her understand that sometimes the people who should love you most can be the most dangerous? We've decided to be honest but age-appropriate, to give her the information she needs to protect herself from manipulation without making her afraid of family. Richard worries about this too. He's been an amazing grandfather, visiting regularly, helping with Claire, being the kind of family member we actually want in our lives. But he carries guilt about Patricia, about not stopping her sooner, about all the years he looked the other way when she manipulated situations to her advantage. He's promised to tell Claire the truth when she's old enough, to make sure she understands that what Patricia did was wrong, that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting abuse. The legal consequences for Patricia were minimal. What she did was unethical and cruel, but not technically illegal. Fraud requires financial damages, and while we'd suffered emotionally, we couldn't prove monetary harm. The tech guy who cloned Marcus's phone could have faced charges, but we decided not to pursue it. We'd already gotten what we wanted, the truth exposed, Patricia's reputation destroyed. Criminal charges would have dragged us through months of court proceedings, keeping us tied to her when all we wanted was to move on. Miranda faced no consequences at all. She'd been hired to befriend me and flirt with Marcus, which isn't a crime. The fake text messages were the tech guy's doing, not hers. She'd just played her part, collecting her paycheck, probably never imagining the extent of the damage. Sometimes I wonder what happened to her after she left Cleveland. Did she feel guilty? Did she think about what she'd done, how she'd almost destroyed a marriage? Or did she just move on to the next job, the next performance, filing the whole thing away as another acting gig? I'll never know, and maybe that's for the best. The whole experience changed how I see people. I used to be trusting, open, willing to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Now I'm more cautious, more analytical. I look for ulterior motives, hidden agendas, inconsistencies in stories. Marcus says I've become cynical. Maybe he's right. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. Maybe a little cynicism is healthy, a form of self-protection. At the same time, I try not to let what Patricia did turn me into someone bitter and closed off. I still make friends, still open up to people, still believe that most people are fundamentally good. I just take my time now, pay attention to red flags, trust my instincts when something feels off. The bookstore has become my sanctuary, my safe space. I love helping customers find the perfect book, creating displays, hosting events. It's something that's entirely mine, untouched by Patricia's manipulation. Marcus has his business, I have my store, and together we have Claire. That's enough. That's more than enough. We've started thinking about the future in ways we couldn't before. Maybe having another child in a few years. Maybe moving to a bigger house with a yard. Maybe traveling more, showing Claire the world beyond Cleveland. All the things we'd put on hold while dealing with Patricia's interference, we can think about now. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven Patricia. The honest answer is no. Forgiveness requires remorse, and Patricia has never shown genuine remorse for what she did. She's sorry she got caught, sorry her plan failed, sorry she lost her son and her social standing. But she's never actually acknowledged that what she did was fundamentally wrong, never shown real understanding of the pain she caused. Without that, forgiveness feels impossible. Marcus struggles with this too. Part of him wants to forgive her, wants to believe his mother is capable of change and growth. But the rational part of him knows that Patricia is who she's always been, that her manipulation of our marriage was just the most extreme example of a pattern that's been there his whole life. He can't risk letting her back in, can't risk her manipulating Claire the way she manipulated him. We've built good boundaries. We've created a life that works for us, that makes us happy. We've turned Patricia's attempt to destroy us into the catalyst for becoming stronger, more united, more aware of what we want and need from each other. In a twisted way, her betrayal became the thing that saved our marriage by forcing us to confront our problems and commit to fixing them. People sometimes ask if I regret exposing Patricia so publicly. If I wish I'd handled it more privately, more discreetly. The answer is always no. Patricia spent her whole life caring about her reputation, about what people thought of her, about maintaining this perfect image. Destroying that image, showing everyone who she really was, that was the only thing that would truly hurt her. A private confrontation would have meant nothing. She would have made excuses, played the victim, found a way to spin the situation. But there's no spinning video evidence, bank records, written confessions. The truth was undeniable, and it had to be public. The party, that moment when I played those recordings in front of all her friends and family, that was the most terrifying and empowering moment of my life. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. But I was also filled with this fierce determination. Patricia had tried to take everything from me, my marriage, my husband, my future. She'd made me doubt myself, question my worth, feel like I wasn't good enough. Standing in front of all those people, exposing her lies, taking back my power, that was everything. Marcus tells me I'm one of the bravest people he knows. I don't feel brave. I feel like I did what I had to do to protect my family. Maybe that's what bravery is. Doing the hard thing even when you're terrified. Standing up for yourself and the people you love even when it would be easier to stay silent. Claire's getting bigger every day. She's starting to recognize faces, to smile when she sees us, to reach for toys and babble in that sweet baby language that melts my heart. Every milestone she hits feels like a victory, a reminder that we made it through Patricia's attack and came out stronger on the other side. Richard brought over old photo albums last week, pictures of Marcus as a baby. We sat on the couch going through them, comparing Marcus's baby features to Claire's. Richard pointed out photos of Patricia holding baby Marcus, and for a moment his face got sad. She wasn't always like this, he said quietly. Or maybe she was and I just didn't want to see it. I should have protected you both better. We assured him it wasn't his fault. Patricia was a master manipulator. She'd spent decades perfecting her skills, learning how to control situations and people without anyone noticing. Richard had been one of her longest victims, conditioned over 40 years of marriage to ignore the red flags, to make excuses for her behavior. Breaking free from that kind of psychological control takes courage, and he'd done it. That mattered. The divorce between Richard and Patricia was finalized 2 months ago. Patricia tried to fight it, tried to claim Richard was abandoning her in her time of need, tried to get more money in the settlement. But Richard's lawyers were thorough. They documented years of emotional manipulation, brought in therapists who testified about narcissistic personality patterns, showed how Patricia had used money and social pressure to control Richard's decisions. In the end, the judge wasn't sympathetic to her claims. Patricia got the house and a reasonable settlement. enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Richard got his freedom and the peace of mind that comes with finally standing up to an abuser. He told us he should have done it years ago, that he'd wasted too much of his life trying to appease someone who could never be satisfied. We've become closer to Richard than we ever were when he was married to Patricia. He comes over for dinner every week, helps Marcus with business decisions, babysits Claire when we need a break. He's the grandfather Claire deserves, present and loving and genuinely interested in her life. It's bittersweet, knowing that Claire will grow up with only one grandmother, my mother, while Patricia lives alone in that big house, excluded from all of this by her own choices. My mother flew in from Arizona for Claire's baptism. She'd been my rock through the whole ordeal with Patricia, the one person who'd believed in my marriage even when the evidence looked damning. I knew Marcus wouldn't cheat, she'd told me during those dark weeks. I've seen how he looks at you. Men who look at their wives like that don't stray. She'd been right, but it had taken a private investigator and a mountain of evidence to prove it. At the baptism, surrounded by friends and family who actually cared about us, I felt grateful. Grateful for David Chen's investigative skills. Grateful for Marcus's unwavering insistence that he hadn't sent those messages, even when I didn't believe him. Grateful for my own stubbornness in hiring a private investigator instead of just accepting the obvious explanation. Grateful that the truth came out before it was too late. The priest talked about family and community, about the importance of surrounding children with love and support. I held Claire, feeling her warm weight in my arms, and thought about all the ways Patricia had tried to prevent this moment from happening. It failed. We were here, together, stronger than ever, building a life she had no part in. After the ceremony, several people approached me to say they'd heard about what happened with Patricia. Most were supportive, saying we'd done the right thing in exposing her. A few were more judgmental, suggesting we should have handled it privately, that public humiliation was too harsh. I listened politely but didn't engage. These people hadn't lived through what we'd lived through. They hadn't spent weeks thinking their husband was cheating, hadn't felt their marriage crumbling under the weight of manufactured lies. They had no right to judge how we'd chosen to fight back. One woman, an old friend of Patricia's, pulled me aside. "I've known Patricia for 30 years, she said quietly. "What she did to you and Marcus, it doesn't surprise me. She's always been controlling, always needed to be the center of attention. But none of us ever called her out on it. We all just looked the other way, made excuses for her behavior. I'm sorry we didn't stop her sooner. Maybe if someone had stood up to her years ago, it never would have gotten this far." Her words stayed with me. How many other people had Patricia manipulated over the years? How many relationships had she damaged with her need for control? How many people had suffered in silence because Patricia was wealthy and influential, and no one wanted to challenge her? Our situation had been extreme, but it wasn't unique. It was just the first time someone had fought back publicly enough to break her power. Marcus started therapy on his own, separate from our couple sessions. He needed to process his feelings about his mother, about growing up in a household where love was conditional and manipulation was normal. His therapist helped him see patterns he'd never recognized before. How Patricia had always controlled his choices by making him feel guilty for wanting independence. How she'd sabotaged previous relationships if she didn't approve of his girlfriends. How she'd used money as a weapon, offering financial support only when he did what she wanted. Understanding these patterns was painful but necessary. Marcus realized that her attempt to destroy our marriage was just the culmination of a lifetime of control. She'd always interfered in his relationships, always found ways to end them if they got too serious. I was the first woman he'd married despite her objections, the first relationship she couldn't end through subtle manipulation. So she'd escalated, hiring an actress, faking evidence, orchestrating an elaborate plot because the usual tactics hadn't worked. She would have done this forever, Marcus told me one night after a particularly difficult therapy session. Even if we'd survived this, she would have tried again. Another scheme, another manipulation. The only way to stop her was to cut her off completely. He was right, but that didn't make it easier. Marcus mourned the mother he'd wanted, the parent who should have supported his happiness instead of trying to control it. He cried sometimes, grieving not for Patricia as she was but for the mother she could have been if she'd been capable of unconditional love. I supported him through this as best I could, but I had my own grieving to do. I'd lost the fantasy of having a loving mother-in-law, of Claire having 2 devoted grandmothers, of being part of a big, supportive extended family. Patricia had stolen those possibilities with her actions. Even if she changed, even if she somehow became a different person, the trust was gone. We could never let her back into our lives without risking more manipulation. The bookstore became my therapy in a way. Talking to customers, recommending books, creating a space where people felt welcome and valued. It reminded me that most people are good. Most people don't spend their time plotting against their children's spouses. Most people are capable of genuine kindness and connection. Patricia was an outlier, an extreme case, not representative of humanity as a whole. I started a book club at the store, meeting every other Tuesday evening. We read all kinds of books, fiction and non-fiction, classics and contemporary works. The group became a community, people sharing their lives and thoughts and experiences. Several members became real friends, people I trusted and valued. Building these authentic relationships helped heal some of the damage Patricia had caused. One evening, about 8 months after the birthday party confrontation, a woman came into the bookstore just as I was closing. She was older, maybe mid-60s, well-dressed but not ostentatious. "I know you're closing," she said apologetically, "but I was hoping I could talk to you for a few minutes. My name is Helen. I'm Patricia Morrison's sister." My first instinct was to refuse, to tell her to leave. But something in her face, a genuine sadness mixed with determination, made me pause. "Okay," I said slowly. "But if this is some attempt to get me to reconcile with Patricia, you're wasting your time." Helen shook her head. "That's not why I'm here. I wanted to apologize for my sister's behavior and tell you that not everyone in the Morrison family is like her." We sat in the empty bookstore, surrounded by shelves of books, and Helen told me her story. She and Patricia had grown up in the same wealthy, controlling household. Their parents had been obsessed with status and appearances, demanding perfection from their children. Patricia had learned to manipulate to survive, to control others before they could control her. Helen had chosen a different path, marrying a middle-class teacher and moving away from the family's suffocating expectations. "Patricia and I haven't spoken in 20 years, Helen said. "She cut me off when I married James, said I was embarrassing the family, throwing away my potential. But I've watched from a distance, seen how she treated Richard, how she tried to control Marcus. I wanted to reach out to warn you, but I didn't know how. I'm so sorry for what she put you through." Helen's apology meant something. It showed that Patricia's behavior wasn't inevitable, that coming from the same background didn't mean you had to become a manipulative person. Helen had broken the cycle, chosen kindness over control. It gave me hope that Marcus could do the same, that we could raise Claire in a healthy environment despite the toxicity in the Morrison family history. Before Helen left, she gave me her phone number. "If you or Marcus ever want to talk, to know more about the family history, I'm here. And I'd love to meet Claire someday if you're comfortable with that. I know I'm Patricia's sister, but I promise I'm nothing like her." I took the number, not sure if I'd ever use it. But it was nice to know that not everyone in Marcus's extended family was damaged by Patricia's influence. Some people had escaped. Some people had chosen differently. Marcus was surprised when I told him about Helen's visit. He barely remembered her. Had only met her a few times as a child before Patricia cut off contact. We debated whether to reach out, whether to risk letting another Morrison into our lives. Eventually we decided to invite her for coffee, neutral territory, low stakes. If she seemed manipulative or untrustworthy, we could end the relationship. But if she was genuine, maybe Claire could have another grandparent figure, someone connected to the Morrison family who wasn't toxic. Helen and James came for coffee on a Saturday morning. They brought a small gift for Claire, a hand-knitted blanket, nothing expensive or showy. We talked for 2 hours, feeling each other out, sharing stories. Helen was warm and genuine, clearly delighted to reconnect with Marcus and meet me and Claire. James was quiet but kind, a retired English teacher with a gentle sense of humor. By the end of the visit, we'd agreed to stay in touch. Helen and James became part of our chosen family, the people we actively wanted in our lives rather than the toxic relatives we were obligated to tolerate. They visited regularly, celebrated holidays with us, provided another layer of love and support for Claire. Richard was thrilled to reconnect with his ex-sister-in-law. He and Helen had always gotten along before Patricia forced him to cut off contact. Now they could rebuild that relationship without Patricia's interference. Our family was growing, but on our terms, with people who genuinely cared about us. A year after the confrontation, I ran into someone who'd been at the birthday party. She stopped me on the street, recognizing me from that night. "I just wanted to tell you," she said. "What you did took incredible courage. My mother-in-law has been making my life miserable for years, but I never had the guts to stand up to her. Watching you expose Patricia, seeing her face consequences for her actions, it inspired me. I set boundaries with my mother-in-law. Our relationship is better now because she knows I won't tolerate manipulation." Her words meant more than she probably realized. If our story could help even one person recognize and resist manipulation, if it could give someone else the courage to protect their marriage and their mental health, then the public confrontation had been worth it. We hadn't just fought for ourselves. We'd fought against the idea that family members can treat you badly without consequences, that wealth and status should protect people from accountability. The bookstore expanded again. We added a children's section, inspired by reading to Claire every night. I hosted story times on weekend mornings, watching kids sit cross-legged on the floor, enraptured by tales of adventure and magic. Some of those kids had complicated families too. Parents who were divorced, grandparents who weren't involved, relatives who caused more harm than good. But in the bookstore, surrounded by stories, they were just kids enjoying books. It reminded me what mattered: creating safe spaces and positive experiences, building good things instead of tearing others down. Marcus's business continued to grow. He specialized in financial planning for small businesses, helping entrepreneurs manage their money and plan for the future. He was good at it, better than he'd ever been at the corporate accounting job. Working for himself, free from his mother's expectations and influence, he flourished. He was happier, more confident, more present in our family life. We bought a house finally, a 3-bedroom place in Lakewood with a small yard and a garage. Nothing fancy, but it was ours, paid for with our own hard work and smart financial planning. We didn't need Morrison family money. We didn't want it. Everything we built ourselves, free from Patricia's control and manipulation. Claire took her first steps in that house, wobbling across the living room floor into Marcus's waiting arms. We both cried, overwhelmed by the simple joy of watching our daughter grow. These moments, these ordinary miracles of family life, this was what Patricia had tried to destroy. The fact that we were here, experiencing this together, felt like the ultimate victory. Sometimes I still thought about that moment at the party, standing in front of everyone with my phone held high, Patricia's voice echoing through the speakers. The shock on her face. The gasps from the crowd. The way the room shifted from celebration to horror in a matter of minutes. It had been terrifying and exhilarating and devastating all at once. I destroyed someone's life that night, even if that someone had been trying to destroy mine first. Did I feel guilty about it? Sometimes. In quiet moments when I let myself think too deeply. Patricia was alone now, isolated, her carefully constructed life in ruins. She'd brought it on herself, but I'd been the instrument of her downfall. I'd chosen the nuclear option, the public exposure, knowing it would hurt her in the worst possible way. But then I'd remember those emails. The cold calculation in her words. The $15,000 she'd paid to hire an actress. The tech guy cloning Marcus's phone. The weeks she'd let us suffer, thinking our marriage was falling apart, enjoying her success while we struggled. She'd orchestrated every painful moment, and she'd felt no remorse at all. No, I didn't feel guilty. Felt satisfied. Patricia had underestimated me. She'd thought I was weak, that I'd just accept the obvious explanation and walk away from my marriage. She'd thought Marcus would believe her sympathy, her offers of support, never suspecting his own mother had orchestrated the whole thing. She'd been wrong about both of us, and that miscalculation had been her downfall. Marcus never expressed guilt about cutting his mother off. He was sad about it, grieved the relationship they could have had, but he didn't regret the decision. She made her choices, he told me more than once. She chose manipulation over honesty, control over trust, her own agenda over my happiness. I'm just responding to the choices she made. We were invited to fewer social events in Patricia's circles, which was fine with us. We didn't want to be part of that world anyway. The country club dinners and charity galas where everyone smiled while plotting against each other. We built our own social life with people we actually liked, people who valued authenticity over appearances. Richard thrived in his new life too. He started dating someone, a kind woman named Susan who worked as a nurse. She was nothing like Patricia, warm and genuine and comfortable in her own skin. Richard seemed younger around her, lighter, like he'd been carrying a weight for years and had finally put it down. We all had dinner together sometimes, Marcus and me, Claire, Richard and Susan, Helen and James. It felt like a real family, people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company, who supported each other without ulterior motives. This was what family was supposed to be, and Patricia had no place in it. Claire's second birthday came and went. We had a small party at our house with close friends and family. There were balloons and cake and presents. Claire laughed and played, oblivious to all the drama that had preceded her birth. She would grow up knowing love and support, surrounded by people who wanted the best for her without trying to control her. She would never know the grandmother who'd tried to prevent her parents from staying together, and maybe that was for the best. People still asked about Patricia sometimes, curious about whether she'd tried to contact us, whether there'd been any reconciliation. The answer was always no. Patricia had made a few attempts in the first year, sending letters and gifts that we returned unopened. But eventually, even she seemed to understand that it was over. Her actions had consequences. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. I thought about writing this all down properly, turning it into a book or a blog or something that could help others recognize manipulation in their own lives. But part of me wanted to keep it private, to protect Claire from having her family drama exposed on the internet. Maybe someday, when she was older and could understand, I'd share the story more widely. For now, it remained our experience, our lesson, our cautionary tale. The bookstore hosted an event on healthy family boundaries. I brought in a therapist to lead the discussion. The room was packed, standing room only, people hungry for information about how to deal with toxic family members. We talked about narcissistic personality traits, about manipulation tactics, about the importance of protecting your mental health even when it means cutting off family. Person after person shared their stories of controlling parents, manipulative in-laws, relatives who'd caused immense damage. I realized our experience wasn't unique. It was extreme but not unique. During the Q&A, someone asked me directly about my mother-in-law. Word had spread the way it does in cities like Cleveland. People knew the basic story. I thought about deflecting, about keeping it private. But then I decided these people deserved to hear the truth, to know that standing up to manipulation was possible. I told them everything. The actress, the fake messages, the private investigator, the birthday party confrontation. I talked about the decision to go public, about why we'd chosen that path. I was honest about the consequences, how it had destroyed Patricia's life, how we'd cut her off completely. And I talked about the aftermath, how we'd rebuilt our marriage and our family, how we were happier now than we'd ever been. The room was silent when I finished. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Soon the whole room was applauding, not celebrating Patricia's downfall but recognizing the courage it took to fight back, to refuse to be a victim. Several people came up to me after, sharing their own stories, asking for advice. I gave them David Chen's card, told them to document everything, to trust their instincts, to protect themselves and their families. That night, driving home from the event, I felt at peace for the first time in months. Sharing the story, helping others understand that they weren't alone, that manipulation could be recognized and resisted, it felt meaningful. Patricia had tried to destroy me, but instead she'd made me stronger. She'd made Marcus stronger. She'd made our marriage stronger. In trying to tear us apart, she'd fused us together in ways that might never have happened otherwise. Marcus and I talk sometimes about whether we'd do anything differently if we could go back. Would we still do the public confrontation? Would we handle it privately? Would we give Patricia another chance? The answers are always yes, no, and no. We stand by our choices. Patricia earned every consequence she faced. The years pass. Claire grows. The bookstore thrives. Marcus's business succeeds. We're happy, genuinely happy, in a way that feels hard-earned and precious. We know how close we came to losing everything. We know what it took to fight back and win. That knowledge makes us appreciate what we have even more. Sometimes on quiet evenings after Claire's asleep, Marcus and I sit on our back porch and talk about everything we've been through. The pain and anger have faded, replaced by gratitude and determination. Gratitude that we survived Patricia's attack. Determination to build a life so full of love and authenticity that her toxicity can never touch us again. We've created something beautiful from the ashes of her betrayal. A family that chooses each other every day. A life built on honesty and trust. A future that's ours to shape, free from manipulation and control. Patricia wanted to destroy us, but she failed. And in failing, she lost everything while we gained more than we ever imagined possible. So when people ask if I regret how we handled things, if I wish we'd been kinder or more forgiving or more private, I tell them the truth. Have no regrets. We fought back the only way that would work. We exposed the truth and faced the consequences and came out stronger. We protected our family, our marriage, and our future. And we'd do it all again in a heartbeat. That's our story. From manipulation to exposure to revenge to healing. It's not a fairy tale with a perfect ending. Patricia's still out there, still alone, still suffering the consequences of her choices. We still deal with the trauma sometimes, still work through trust issues in therapy. But we're together, or happy, or free. And that's the best revenge of all, living well despite someone's best efforts to destroy you. Now when I look at Claire, I see hope. She'll grow up knowing that love should be unconditional, that family members should support rather than control, that manipulation is never acceptable no matter who it comes from. She'll have boundaries and self-respect and the courage to walk away from toxic people, even if they share her DNA. She'll have the tools we didn't have, the awareness we had to learn the hard way. That's our gift to her, the lesson we learned from Patricia's betrayal. And maybe that's the real victory. Not Patricia's downfall, though that was satisfying. Not the public exposure, though that was necessary. The real victory is breaking the cycle, building something healthy and whole, creating a family based on love instead of control. Patricia's legacy could have been continued manipulation, Marcus learning her tactics and passing them on. Instead, her legacy is a family that rejects everything she stood for, that chooses authenticity and kindness and genuine connection. So here I am years later telling this story. Not because I'm proud of destroying someone, but because I'm proud of protecting what matters. My marriage, my family, my future. Patricia tried to take all of that from me, and I refused to let her win. That's the story. That's the truth. That's what happened when I discovered my mother-in-law's elaborate plot and decided to fight back with everything I had. Have you ever had to make the impossible choice between keeping peace with family and protecting your own marriage and mental health? Do you think public exposure was the right call? Or should some betrayals be handled behind closed doors even when the manipulation is that extreme?